I came back from Tokyo to an empty house and a legal notice taped to the fridge. No bags. No toys. No explanation. Just a sterile sheet of lawyer speak taped neatly to the fridge door like a grocery list, commanding that I never contact my wife again. I stood in the kitchen, suitcase still in hand, jet lag humming in my bones, holding that letter like it might sting if I blinked the wrong way. Her handwriting wasn't on it. No post-it note. No messy apology. Just a firm line drawn by someone else's hand, a stranger who now apparently spoke for her. I walked through each room like a man in someone else's life. The bed was stripped. Drawers open. The empty hangers looked like ribs. Her scent was gone, replaced by that cold, sour smell of things ending. I opened the pantry and found my son's cereal missing. His favorite plastic cup, the one with the chipped dinosaur decal, gone too. Even the tub toys? Who remembers to take tub toys? It felt precise. Not like heartbreak. Not like a woman crying in an airport, torn and trembling and unsure. No, this was something else. It felt like strategy. Like a wire had been tripped the moment my plane lifted off from Haneda and she'd already practiced the escape a dozen times before. The dog sitter was still paid up for the week. The plants were watered. She didn't just leave. She planned this. And that scared me more than anything. I stood there in the kitchen, the dull hum of the fridge buzzing louder than it should. The silence was suffocating. No footsteps. No echo of laughter upstairs. Just this void. Like my family had been erased. I read the letter again, slower this time, looking for meaning in between the words. You are hereby instructed to refrain from all contact with the petitioner. Petitioner. A word that sounds like someone knocking on the gates of a kingdom they already own. My wife, now cast in legal armor, had become the petitioner. And I, the unknowing antagonist in a story that started while I was across an ocean, had become him. The problem. The threat. No warning. No fight. Not even the decency of blame. Just this sudden surgical silence. And yet it wasn't sadness that hit me first. It was confusion. Then dread. Because when a marriage falls apart, there are usually cracks. Fights. Distance. Cold shoulders and whispered names you don't recognize. But with us, there was nothing. At least not that I saw. She kissed me goodbye at the terminal. Told me to bring back matcha Kit Kats for Ethan. Said she loved me, I swear she said that. Unless she didn't. Unless that was part of the plan too. I moved through the house again, opening closets, scanning for any signs she'd left in a hurry. But no, the garbage had been taken out. The sheets on the guest bed were laundered and folded with care. There were no signs of chaos. Only intent. And that was the part one couldn't stop thinking about. Not the loss. Not even the betrayal. But the preparation. The absolute clarity it takes to look at someone, kiss them goodbye, and then erase them before their flight even lands. I touched the edge of the fridge where the tape had curled. Something inside me curled too. Because this wasn't abandonment. This wasn't even escape. It was war. And I hadn't even known we were fighting. She disconnected her number, blocked my emails, and deactivated her socials within an hour of filing. At 3:07 p.m. I landed. By 3:54, her number gave me a robotic, "This user is no longer in service." By 4:16, my emails bounced. By 5:02, I was locked out of every way I'd ever spoken to her. At first, I thought it was a glitch. A server down, a mistake in the carrier. I told myself it was technical. People don't vanish like that, not normal people. Not mothers. But every tap of the screen was a closed door. Every refresh led nowhere. I checked her Instagram. Gone. Facebook? Deleted. WhatsApp? Blank avatar, double check marks frozen mid-thought. Even the shared family calendar erased. Doctor's appointments, Ethan's soccer schedule, reminders to refill the allergy meds, gone. I called the daycare next. My voice cracked halfway through. They asked for my name. I gave it. The woman on the line paused, then said, "I'm sorry, we can't disclose any information." A line they must have been trained to deliver. But the tone, it wasn't sympathy. It was protocol. Rehearsed. Like she knew I'd call. My next call was to her mother. Straight to voicemail. Then again. Then again. No answer. I sent a text, something simple, "Please? Just tell me he's okay." It stayed on, delivered. It never turned red. It never turned into anything. I tried our friends. Couples we'd vacation with. Dinners. Game nights. Weddings. No one picked up. One of them texted back later, "I think it's best if I stay out of this." That was all. No name. No emotion. Just a clean severing. Like she'd prepped them all. The eerie part wasn't the silence. It was how coordinated the silence felt. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a shutout. I wasn't just locked out, I was erased. And that thought didn't just hurt. It made me realize something darker. This wasn't spontaneous. She'd planned this like a fire drill. Pack the bag, clear the cash, prep the daycare, silence the noise. Tell no one, or tell them just enough. Play the part of the scared mother, the guarded daughter, the friend who can't say. And maybe, just maybe, tell them something about me that would make them comply. That's when the panic began to slip into something colder. Not rage. Not yet. But suspicion. Because there's only one reason to vanish this cleanly. One reason to remove every trace of a person from your life in under 12 hours. It's not fear. It's not grief. It's not even spite. It's control. And I don't know what scared me more, that she wanted it, or that I didn't know what she was going to do with it. I stopped crying the moment I opened our shared savings account and found it empty. I don't remember sitting down. Just the screen lighting my face, the numbers loading, and then nothing. No funds. No recent activity. No warning. Just the empty echo of $0 staring back like a smirk. I clicked again. Refreshed. Logged out. Logged in. Same result. Then I checked the checking account. Same. The college fund? Closed. Emergency fund? Gone. Investment portfolio? Transferred to a name I didn't recognize. I wasn't crying anymore. Grief had been replaced by that sharp-edged silence that comes after an earthquake. When nothing around you makes sense, but you know something permanent has shifted. She didn't just leave me. She removed me. Surgically. Quietly. Without leaving a fingerprint behind. I moved to the file cabinet, still half believing this could be some horrible misunderstanding. But the folders were too neat. Too curated. Our joint tax documents were missing. So was the folder labeled LLC, the business I started, the one she once said was our future. Instead, in its place was a thinner folder. New forms. New names. One of them, a woman I'd never met, was listed as a partner. Her address? Not mine. The filing date? While I was still in Tokyo. My hands stopped shaking. My breath slowed. Not out of calm, but clarity. Like frost creeping over glass. This wasn't betrayal. It was choreography. I thought we were married. Turns out I'd been a character in someone else's exit plan. Every drawer I opened confirmed it. Passwords changed. Files renamed. Her signature was everywhere, just never where it was supposed to be. She'd spent months building an alternate life under the surface of ours. And I was so focused on being a good provider, I never saw the blueprint unfolding right under my roof. This wasn't a messy breakup. It wasn't heartbreak. It was an operation. Strategic. Efficient. Inhumanly calm. And once I saw that, once I truly understood what she had done, I stopped acting like the victim. I stopped crying. Stopped asking why. Stopped believing I was owed even an ounce of explanation. I became what she clearly thought I was incapable of being. Quiet. Focused. Cold. There's something that happens when you realize you were never the main character in your own marriage. You stop trying to write love letters. You start reading the fine print. And what I found in the margins of our life was a woman I never really knew. The loan application had my name, but I'd never seen it before. I didn't find it by accident. I found it because I stopped looking for answers and started looking for evidence. Buried deep in our digital banking archive, under a masked LLC routing and a mismatched PDF label, it waited. A 6-figure loan. Approved. Disbursed. Secured against the cabin we inherited from my father, the one she said we'd renovate someday. According to the paperwork, I'd signed over partial ownership to her mother. According to reality, I hadn't signed anything. But there it was, my name. Neat. Crisp. Familiar enough to pass casual scrutiny. Except the angle on the R was off. Not enough for a machine to flag it, but enough for me to feel something twist in my gut. I learned cursive from my grandfather. He always said the R is like a bow pulled back, tight, not open. Whoever forged that signature didn't know the bow was supposed to be closed. They let it hang open like an afterthought. That was the moment it all shifted. The panic, the grief, the disbelief, all of it drained away. What replaced it was something colder, cleaner, precision. I stared at the screen, my mind tracing every line of the forged document like a crime scene photo. The timestamps. The IP address metadata. She hadn't even used a VPN. She'd been in the house, our house, when she sent the transfer request. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop. I just made 2 calls. The first, a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Divorce wasn't his specialty. Financial crime was. He picked up on the 3rd ring. The second call was harder. Not emotionally, strategically. Because the man I called owed me a favor. The kind of favor you don't ask for unless you're willing to cash in everything. He answered with a simple, "You finally calling this in?" I said nothing for a beat. Then, "I need a deep trace. Full digital pull. And quiet." He didn't ask why. He just said, "Check your inbox in 12. And then it began. Not the revenge. Not even the justice. Just the unraveling. Because now I had confirmation. This wasn't abandonment. This wasn't a marriage ending. This was identity theft. Asset stripping. And if I was going to be the ghost she tried to erase, then I'd haunt her with truth. One forged signature at a time. She called it our reset plan. He replied, "Let's bleed him first." The envelope was plain. No label. No logo. Just weight. Heavy enough to know it mattered before I even opened it. Inside, a manila folder dog-eared at the corners. Tabs. Timestamps. Printouts. The private investigator had warned me, read it in one sitting or don't read it at all. I didn't understand why until page 6. It wasn't just cheating. It wasn't even betrayal. It was architecture. She had laid out the demolition of our life like blueprints for a renovation. Except I was the drywall. The foundation. The part they intended to strip, sell, and replace. His name was Caleb. I had never met him. Never heard of him. But there he was in the message logs, not flirting, not seducing, not begging. Planning. March 3rd, 1:12 a.m. Her, "Once the Tokyo trip is confirmed, I'll initiate phase 1. Him, "Good. Don't forget the IRS letter this time." June 9th. Her, "We need to keep him calm. Play nice until the switch." Him, "You're better at lying than I thought." Her, "I've had practice. I read that one twice. The ink didn't blur because of tears. It blurred because my vision fractured. Because just 2 days after that message, she took me out for dinner. Said she missed us. Held my hand across the table like it meant something. Told me I was her rock. And the entire time, she was chipping away at the foundation. There were texts about the house, how she'd shift ownership by claiming I was emotionally unstable. Texts about the loan, how they drain the equity through her mother's name so it looks legit. Texts about our son. Not many, but enough. Caleb, what about the kid? Her, he loves him. That's leverage. Caleb, keep the leash short. We need the time. I stopped reading after that. The room was quiet, but inside me everything was breaking glass. This wasn't love that died. It was something else. Something colder. Calculated. Like watching a building you thought was your home collapse, only to realize it had been scheduled for demolition long ago and you were the last one to leave. Not lovers. Not even friends. Co-conspirators. That's what haunted me most. They weren't trying to run away together. They were trying to dismantle me. And all that time, she curled up next to me at night, whispered promises into my sleep, asked if we could start fresh. She didn't lie to my face. She lied to my life. She thought I was at conferences. I was meeting with lawyers across borders. She used to kiss me goodbye like she'd already won. Don't forget to network, she'd say. Bring me something weird from the airport. To her, every trip I took was another open door, more time, more freedom, more of her carefully staged unraveling. She thought I was shaking hands and sipping hotel wine, blind to the shifting ground beneath me. She had no idea I'd started preparing the moment I noticed her voice change months before Tokyo. It was subtle at first. She hesitated when I asked about the accountant, deferred when I mentioned property taxes, started calling our savings account my half. Not red flags. Not yet. More like a shift in weather, something distant on the wind, but coming fast. So I started listening more carefully. And moving quieter. My business conferences became cover. In truth, I spent those weeks in side rooms and soundproof offices, signing papers I never told her existed. Dual citizenship. Asset shields. Ownership structures so complex even I had to diagram them twice. Every property. Every dollar. Every licensing agreement tied to my name was folded into legal shells and offshore trusts, ones that required biometric authentication and 2 foreign witnesses to unlock. She played the short game. The now. The thrill of watching me stumble through her silence, her vanishings, her paperwork traps. But I played the long game. She forged my name. I rewrote my identity. When she drained the accounts, she didn't know they were decoys. When she rerouted the loan, she didn't know the lien had been quietly reassigned 2 months earlier. When she filed for divorce assuming she held the high cards, she had no clue the actual business had been relocated to a jurisdiction that didn't recognize her as a stakeholder. She built her plan on shortcuts. Manipulation. Panic. Speed. But me? I built mine like a clock, quiet, intricate, impossible to hear until it ticks. She believed I trusted her completely. She was wrong. I trusted my instincts more. And when those instincts told me she was preparing for war, I didn't argue. I just stopped making noise. Because the quiet ones? We don't swing wildly when we're betrayed. We study. We disappear into the walls of our lives and we wait. And when the moment comes, we don't fall. We turn the page before they finish writing the ending. The judge read the first line of evidence and she stopped breathing. It was barely audible, a hitch like breath caught on a blade. The courtroom wasn't silent, not really. The shuffle of papers. The low drone of attorneys murmuring objections. The dull clack of the stenographer's keys. But in that moment, when the judge read aloud the first entry from my file, everything else blurred into static. Exhibit A, authorization for property transfer, signed under false pretenses, date stamped during the petitioner's Tokyo absence. And just like that, the mask slipped. She stopped blinking. Her lips parted ever so slightly. Not shock. Not guilt. Recognition. She knew what was coming. Her lawyer rose, fast. Your Honor, we'd like to request a... Denied. Another objection, louder this time. Still, denied. The judge didn't look up. Just kept reading. Page after page, lined with receipts she thought I'd never find. Foreign wire transfers. Altered pediatrician records. Voice logs from daycare meetings she claimed never happened. Even an email thread with Caleb timestamped the day she told me we needed space to grow. Every paragraph was a stone placed gently on the scale. Not angry. Not cruel. Just true. I didn't look at her. Not once. Because this wasn't about her. It wasn't even about the betrayal anymore. It was about the boy in the corner seat, swinging his feet just above the ground, clutching the stuffed bear I gave him before Tokyo. The only real thing left in a room full of stories. She glanced at him once briefly. But he didn't look back. He was tracing the threads on the bear's nose. Focused. Small. Whole. And maybe that's when it hit her. Not the evidence. Not the exposure. Not the unraveling of a plan she thought was bulletproof. But the cost. The boy who used to run into her arms at daycare now sat stone still watching the floor. Too quiet for his age. Too still for a child. And I had let her have that seat. I didn't ask the court to remove her. I didn't request a private hearing. I wanted her to see what silence really looked like. Because all her noise, her schemes, her exit plans, her whispered manipulations meant nothing here. Not next to truth. Not next to love. And not next to the silence of a boy who understood more than he ever should have. When the judge closed the file, he looked at me first. Then her. And for the first time since she left, I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Not anger. Not defiance. Doubt. Like the ground she stood on had always been sandy. And she was only just now realizing the tide was coming. The judge leaned forward. Did you really claim your son had seizures to gain full custody? Her mouth opened, then closed again. No sound, just the slow unraveling of whatever lie she'd been preparing. Her lawyer shifted, too fast, too forced. Your Honor, we... The judge didn't blink. I'll repeat the question. Still, silence. And then, no comment. 2 words. 2 nails in the coffin of a story she had once delivered with such calm, such maternal sincerity that even I had begun to doubt myself. But now it was laid bare. The school nurse's testimony. The one who'd sat beside our son for 2 years, never once logging a seizure. Just a mild wheat allergy and the occasional stomach ache after pizza parties. Then the pediatrician's statement. Filed. Stamped. Clarifying that the neurological episodes she referenced in court didn't exist. That the clinic never prescribed the medication she mentioned. That the letter she had submitted on their letterhead had never left their office. And then came the emails. Buried in a recovery cache she didn't know I had access to. A conversation between her and Caleb. Her, if I say he has seizure activity, it looks bad if the court splits custody. Him, won't they check? Her, not if I say I'm the primary caregiver. They assume the dad's detached. That line stayed with me. They assume the dad's detached. It wasn't just a lie. It was a bet. A wager on the court's apathy. On the system's bias. On the worn-out myth that fathers don't fight. But I had. And I was still standing. The courtroom changed after that. Not loud. Not sudden. But like a room where the light has shifted and no one can go back to pretending it's dark. The stenographer stopped typing with urgency. The clerk stopped glancing at the clock. Even the opposing counsel, her second chair, started avoiding eye contact. Because this wasn't just a custody dispute anymore. It was fraud. And more than that, it was a weaponized lie about a child. A boy who never had seizures. Who was never once rushed to the ER. Who now had a medical file permanently tainted by fiction. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She sat very still, as if moving would break whatever spell of control she still thought she had. And in a way, it already had. Because her story didn't just crack. It collapsed. Piece by piece, document by document, until all that remained was a woman caught in her own architecture of deceit. And across the aisle, I sat quietly. Not gloating. Not even relieved. Just still. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's as quiet as a judge setting down a page. And saying nothing at all. Outside the courthouse, I held my son's hand and leaned close to her. She stood alone on the steps. Not surrounded. Not comforted. Just still, like someone waiting for instructions that would never come. The crowd had thinned. Attorneys wandered off, checking watches. A cold wind pulled at the hem of her blazer, one she'd worn during our honeymoon in Barcelona. Back then it was sunshine and sea salt. Now it clung to her like a costume that no longer fit. I could have kept walking. Could have brushed past her without a word, my son's hand warm in mine. But I didn't. I stopped. Not for closure. Not for power. Just to say something true. She looked up, eyes unfocused. Not red. Not tearful. Just hollow. Not sad. Disarmed. Like the playbook had run out of pages and no one had told her how the story ends when the target doesn't break. I leaned in, close enough that no one else would hear. Close enough to smell the remnants of her courtroom perfume, a scent that once meant coming home. And I said just 6 words. Soft. Even. You filed for divorce. You lost everything. Her expression didn't change at first. But I saw it in the blink. In the way her jaw set, not in anger, but in absence. Like she'd been waiting to win a game that no longer existed. She opened her mouth, maybe to speak, maybe to argue, but nothing came. And I didn't wait. I turned and walked away, my son's fingers wrapped tightly around mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Because the war wasn't over, custody reviews would come, assets still needed sorting, damage would echo. But the battlefield? That had shifted. The ground she once stood on, the lies, the secrets, the script she'd memorized so well, was gone. All that remained was the sound of our steps. Slow, certain, and the whisper of a woman realizing too late. It was never about who left. It was about who survived. Revenge didn't fix it, but control gave me peace. I don't celebrate. There was no victory lap, no champagne, no post-courtroom dinner where friends clinked glasses and said, "You did it." Because winning something like this doesn't feel like winning. It feels like standing in the ashes of a life you built with both hands. And choosing deliberately not to look back. I won't pretend it didn't scar me. The trust, the blind spots, the years I thought were safe. Birthdays, hospital visits, late-night stories in bed. All of it happened inside a house with invisible cracks. And I was the only one who didn't hear them forming. But scars can be useful. They don't just remind you what was lost. They remind you where not to step again. Now, the business is mine again. On paper. In code. In name. I took it apart piece by piece and rebuilt it. Every LLC, every license, every dollar layered with protections she can't reach, can't undo, can't even find. My son lives with me now. Not full-time yet, but enough. Enough that I wake to the sound of tiny footsteps and mismatched socks. Enough that bedtime stories aren't something I read out of guilt. He laughs again. Not all the time. Not loudly. But he laughs. And when he does, it's real. As for sleep, I get it now. Not because I'm healed. Not because everything is fair. But because I didn't just survive her. I outgrew her. I didn't scorch the earth. I rebuilt it. Brick by calculated brick. The insurance clause she tried to steal, rewritten. The house deed transferred, notarized, locked. Every vulnerable point in my life, once open to manipulation, is now a fortress. I don't fantasize about what she's doing now. I don't refresh her name in search engines. I don't need to know how her story ends. Because I'm finally writing mine. And this time, nothing's in her name.